Hey everybody, welcome to a slightly unusual episode of Tailgating with Geniuses, lawn chair conversations with incredibly smart people from the world of business, with the usual side rails into things that interest us from every realm of media, business, sports, entertainment, you name it. I am Ken Schmidt, one of your typical co-hosts here, your tolerable host here on the show. I am joined, as always, by my fellow co-founder in Torque Sessions Leadership Events, Mr. Martin Flaherty, who is in Atlanta, Georgia today. Martin.
Hello, Ken. Hello, gentlemen. And by the way, I just want to add in, Ken, just like we are going to get asked this question. Everybody's favorite co-host, Lakon, is out for the year, sort of like the Aaron Rodgers of tailgating with genius. Not an Achilles tendon, but he's off doing important things related to stuff that confuses us, but makes us giggle nonetheless. AI. So Lakon, as you can imagine, is deep in the world of AI at the mystical, magical Google. So will not be joining us, but instead, Ken.
Instead, you will notice that the gentleman in the frame, if you're watching this, who's not wearing a Milwaukee Brewers jersey, because we're recording this in Milwaukee today, is a very good friend of the show, very good friend of mine, an awesome human being, a really smart guy, worthy of the Tailgating with Geniuses genius title, Mr. Scott Habegger. Hello, Scott.
Hello. Thanks for having me today.
Scott, in addition to having a tremendous career over decades, more than 27 years at Harley-Davidson, which is where I came into contact with him way back in the day. He held a number of leadership positions in product development, advertising, marketing strategy, more success stories than I could possibly begin to count. He's now an adjunct professor of marketing at the Milwaukee School of Engineering. And as if that weren't enough, he's also the author of one of our favorite books here, Tailgating with Geniuses, The Marketing Detective: Discovering the Secrets of Small Data to Fulfill Customer Needs. So, Scott, thanks for joining us today. Thanks for sitting right next to me in my hotel room here in Milwaukee. This looks a little untoward. All right. Hey, you know what I want to talk about today, Martin? You know what I want to talk about today, especially because we have Scott here. I want to talk about positioning today, okay? Positioning a business, positioning yourself. And if there's any topic that we run into when we're out doing our Torque Sessions leadership events, or speaking somewhere, working with anybody, it's always the topic du jour, because it's what we lead with when we work with clients is, how do you want to be remembered? What do you want people to say about your business? And it's always astounding that the leaders of really successful businesses don't know how to answer these questions. So what we're talking about here is positioning. And I don't know about you, Scott, or Martin, why this is such a, attention creating thing for business people to get their heads around of how do you want to be known? There's a million examples of businesses and people that do it right, and a million examples of people who do it wrong. Martin, is there one thing that the business leaders that we work with have more in common than their inability to describe why their business exists and how they want it to be known?
No, it's actually amazing because, we get this opportunity to go in and tell stories, but not because we love these stories. We get these opportunities because, the core of what we do is deliver sort of this way in which companies can start thinking differently and creating that differentiation, that position. The thing to me that I always look at is, I don't think when people, they grab the word the way they do branding, the way they do marketing as some sort of amorphous thing that they're not entirely sure about. But part of it to me is like positioning, it makes you ask the question, is in relation to what? So, you make a product, you do a particular thing, you provide a particular service. The thinking always is about the factors, the elements, the deliverables inside of that service or product. And rarely is it beyond, it's always that classic show up and throw up, right? You're just talking specifically about the product or service itself, as opposed to the problem that you're solving. And there's some great quotes, and Scott, I'm sure you got a bunch of them, but like that whole idea around really what you're doing is you don't talk about the product you have, you talk about the problem that needs to get solved. And I think the challenge in positioning is so many companies are wadded up into, we can do this really well, you should like us, we have a nice price. And it kind of ends there.
Well, I would take that, Scott, and lob this your way for a second, because you've got America's future in your classroom every day.
The children.
Yeah.
Do you find that these bright young minds are they thinking positioning for themselves, for their business? They're going to be out looking for jobs soon enough. Is this something that's on the radar? Or are they so focused on, as most corporations are, the marketing side of the equation, that they kind of jump ahead of themselves?
Yeah, they're not really focused on it until we address it. Say this is something you have to look at. But one of the key things we talk about is that positioning is in the minds of the customers, right? We can say whatever we want, but it's the customers who are positioning us. So kind of as you say, what do people say about us? That's the key, because that's how they think about your company. And the other part of that, I would say, I think there's companies who believe they are positioning themselves, but then they don't look and say, are we backing it up? Do I back it up? And I'll just give an example of a car dealer I know who says they're the home of the nice guys, right? That's how they're positioned.
I love it already.
We're the home of the nice guys, right? So I called them because I'm like, I'm interested. Can you back it up? So I called them and asked if they had a training program or if they have defined what it means. And the person said, well, I don't know. Let me forward you
to somebody nicer.
So I got forwarded, and that person said, didn't know. Let me get you to sales. So I get to sales, and I leave a message. Home of the nice guys, have you defined what nice is? Can you measure it? And left the message and never heard back from them. Which didn't seem really very nice to me.
It doesn't seem nice at all.
But no, to me, it's a piece of saying this, and maybe they do. I just don't know. They might have that. But you think you've positioned yourself in the market. Here's who we are. But if you don't go out and look and say, are we delivering what we said we are, then you're not positioned.
There's a huge chasm between a tagline and positioning. And this is one of the things that gets lost, because they look at that tagline, the marketing function of their language, that 5, 6, 10 word descriptor. Again, most businesses don't back it up. But let me just say this. When I talk positioning to people, especially to business leaders across the board, and you know the drill, that businesses are very, very good at what they do. They just don't compete well.
Yeah.
Because they never think about it. All they think about is their processes and how they can do things more efficiently. So I say, all right, let's talk about positioning. And they say, well, that's a conversation for our marketing people. I don't know anything about that. And I say, you have been an expert on positioning since you were 5 years old. Every human being is. When you're standing in front of the mirror in the morning, you stand in the closet trying to figure out what you're going to wear today. How are you going to style your hair? This is how I want to be seen and remembered. Well, that's what positioning is. And if you decide, look, I'm going to dress and look like the coolest dude in town, or the nicest guy in town, well, then my behavior needs to live up to that. Pal, that's in a nutshell. That's what we're talking about here. It's how do we want to be known, and what behavior do we show to back that up so that people see that, internalize it, and then forever associate that.
So Ken, I take one spin, because a lot of times I find that what people have a hard time doing is there's all that level of self-criticism, right? They don't necessarily feel they're cool or what have you. But the thing that I do is similar to that, which is, I always ask people, is there a holiday coming up where you're going to get a family gathering? And inevitably people say, yeah, more or less they do. And I was like, well, tell me the coolest relative who shows up to that gathering, and who's the worst relative who shows up to that gathering. And they always say, oh, it's Uncle Larry, or, it's, oh my God, Linda, again, we're going to have to deal with, or it's Scott, right? It's always Scott. Everyone's got a Scott. So, but I sit there and I ask them, I was like, okay, so what is it about Uncle Larry that makes you so happy? And they're like, Oh my God, he has the coolest stories. He always knows this. And all of a sudden, what happens in that conversation is they're beginning to talk about not Larry as a human being, not Larry as his height, his weight, his age, anything like that. They're talking about the attributes that they know Larry brings into every single conversation. And when poor Linda gets mentioned, they know it's going to be Debbie Downer at the table. It's going to be just all of these horrible things. And I'm like, all right, guys, just so now you get it. Like, you have burned into your head these perceptions of people that have nothing to do with age, sex, race, where they live, anything like that. These are these ideas. And then this is where the challenge becomes that I find in companies, like everybody wants to drop in to some sort of formula, very similar to an accounting principle, to a marketing set of strategies or tactics. Let's talk tactics, not strategies. And these tasks to do that will get them to a position. But Ken, it goes back to what you and I do all the frickin' time, and Scott's written about, is that, you know, it's a whole lot of like, who are you to whom and why? Like, what do you want them to do as a result of the information service you provide?
What I would strongly recommend to anybody and any listener, whether you want to be better positioned and more competitive, because maybe you're interviewing for a job, or you want to be valued more by the people that are above you and that you hope are advocating for you and making your wallet fatter and your career better and shinier, or for you want to make your business more competitive, is you got to sit down. And it doesn't take a tremendous amount of time. And just write, what do I want to be known for? What do I want people to remember and say about me? And what you don't want to be known and remembered for is what the people that you compete against are known and remembered for. He's a really hard worker, really good accountant, brilliant engineer. Those aren't differentiators. That's not positioning. That's basically stating what you do. That's not what positioning is. What's that?
Tell people what we do. You do specifically in the exercise when we look at the competition that's out there and we look at their words. Like, when we put those up on the board, tell the folks listening what you then tell all those leaders in a room what they can no longer do.
Well, thank you for mentioning that. What we'll do is, obviously, if we're looking to position, in no universe would we ever want to be described the same way one of our competitors is described, right? That's not competing at that point. That's ridiculous. So we'll deal with, in a room full of execs, say for a specific business, and this is an exercise anybody can do in 20 minutes or half an hour, is bring up the websites of their competitors and say, let's look at the key words and phrases that these people use to position their business, and we'll kind of circle them, and it'll all be, quality, commitment to customer satisfaction. It's our people who make the difference. And we circle all of those and just make a running laundry list of them. And what we begin to see very, very quickly as we go from website to website is everybody's saying the exact same stuff. And see, why this is helpful is, from a positioning standpoint, is they're telling you, Mr. and Mrs. Executive, exactly what you should not be saying. If somebody else is already claiming that language, you're not going to. These are the words you're going to strike from your vernacular. Why would you elevate or endorse competitors by using their language? And they say, well, geez, we make stuff. And the stuff that we make is good. And, it has to be, because, well, what's a different way to say that other than, the dreaded Q word? Our customers are very important to us. Like, well, duh, right? Find me a place where they're not. Well, let's find a different way to say that has a little bit more hook or cachet to it. And get some of the brighter, more creative minds in your business involved in doing this. Trust me, it's not hard.
Now, the qualifier on that is there has to be a set of behaviors that you have and you start executing, right? Again, if you simply just go open up your thesaurus and start finding, different ways of saying the exact same thing, that's not accomplishing it. But then it becomes a set of behaviors. But Scott, you spend a good, I don't want to end the positioning conversation. I just want to pull Scott more closely in, because The Marketing Detective as a book is really strong in that it gets very explicit into like some thinking around data, which every freaking exec loves, but then rethinking data and taking a lot of what we just talked about into an approach for companies to use. So Scott, would you just give a quick flyover about the marketing detective, about the general idea behind it and why you wrote the book?
Yeah. So the idea of small data, because I talk about small data. And if you think of big data, we all know that numbers, charts, graphs.
All the stuff that irritates me.
Yeah. Good information helps you make decisions, but it can be antiseptic. It can be binary. And you're missing that emotion from the customer. You're missing the nuances of their experience. And so I'm saying the way you get that, you need to be a detective. And you got to go out and find those things from the customer. So I just give an example. If I look at data of motorcycle owners, and we can do all the charts, you can give me all the demographics and psychographics, and I can say, boy, I really know these customers. That's one piece. But you give me small data where I'm talking to a 42-year-old woman who just bought her first Harley Davidson because she's a cancer survivor and decided now it's time for me to live. I'm going to live. I want the freedom. You get that kind of story. And it's like, well, this is a more of an emotional product. This is something way deeper than if you talk about features and things like that, way deeper than that. I'm not going to get that probably in a questionnaire. I'm going to get that when I'm talking with customers. And those insights, can help you with your communications, can help you with your product development. But that's just an example of a difference. Small data, talking with customers, more personal interaction. And that's the focus of what I talk about.
So Scott, I don't think you can speak generalistically about this, but what should a company start doing to embrace this idea of small data? Ken, I do want you just to say it again. And before we get off the show, those 3 lines that you write and talk about, like you boil all of this work into the most simplified way in which anyone can remember, put up on their walls and do so. And we'll get to that in a bit. But Scott, tell me, how does someone sitting inside of a firm do this? Because traditionally someone's going to say, well, okay, what do you want to do? Survey monkey, or just, send something out to people, or like, do you want to go, knock on doors of our customers? How does someone go about doing this? And then one more thing, what's the executive level of buy-in? How do you then take this to someone with the authority to allow this to happen? And then who kind of owns this type of thinking inside of a company, or who should own it? Sorry, a lot of questions there.
Yeah. So marketing detective, right? So to get that concept, think about a TV detective. Those shows, they're all kind of the same, right? We got the crime at the beginning, maybe a murder. Police come in, they look and they say, here's our suspect. And it's looking pretty strong. Well, then our star from the show walks in, sees clues that the police missed, interprets some differently, and sees value in some clues the police saw no value. And then they say, here's our perpetrator. How did the detective do that? They got out there. They did not sit in their office and say, I'm going to send a questionnaire to our suspects and a questionnaire to our witnesses. No, they're out there. So that's what you got to do. And there's a couple easy ways. There are customers trying to interact with your company, be it they're calling the customer service, they're sending an email, some might even send a mail, I don't know. But one thing is respond to them. And if you're an executive, you probably have a customer service area. Go and say, hey, I'd like the names of some of the people we talked to. I'm going to call them. And you can talk about the issue or why they call, but then branch out to other things. So that's one. Just get on the phone and interact. Another one is get out in the street. So if your product is sold at retail, go out to the retail spot and observe your customers shopping, talk with your customers, and get those firsthand insights and the emotion and all of that behind it. Those are 2 kind of easy things, right?
All right, but they're, Scott, they're easy. And what strikes me is you're bringing that up, but that is sort of a truism, right? People know this. Are you finding, or do they know it anymore? Or is this, what's going on? Because I like how you framed this inside of the detective, which is great, which means all of this can be solved in 1 hour with commercial break. So well done.
Yeah.
This is good.
Yeah.
But like, are companies not doing this anymore? Are they relying too much on big data and leaving this behind?
Well, it is a truism, but I think there's a false sense of security and knowledge because I've got so much data.
Yeah.
We've got all these surveys out
Right.
here. So I've got so much, so I know my customers. I got all this data, and you don't even think. I see clues everywhere that companies are trying not to interact personally with the customers. We got a chat bot out there, right? You call for customer service and you have to pound to something and pound again, and they'll keep telling you go to our website, right? Which could be fine if the website is so darn good it can answer any question I want.
Right.
And my best example is I had a 6-week interaction with my bank that was horrible. It should have been a 1-week activity. It was 6 weeks. And I still didn't get resolution. And I happened to be in the bank doing some business. And when I got done, I said to the teller, I've had a bad experience here. And is there someone I could talk to, a manager, to tell them and give them feedback on this? And she said, you can go to our website and fill out a form and send that in. That's
awesome.
I'm like, I am here. And so think about this. Every business, you want customers to come to you, right? Here I am. I'm there. And it's like, well, we could talk to you, but if you could just go to the website and fill out a form. So I think there's this false sense of security that I've got all this data, so I must understand my customers.
You know who I bet had a lot of data? Bed Bath & Beyond. I don't know if you've seen or noticed or followed this, but they disappeared. All right, they were a retail success story for years. If everybody hadn't been to and done business at Bed Bath & Beyond, they certainly knew or had an idea of what it was. This is not a horrible year for retail, despite what a lot of people think. Retail's up higher than it was pre-pandemic. They faded away, went out of business. Now they're seeing an afterlife because they've been acquired by Overstock. So now Bed Bath & Beyond is an online business. Okay, and I wish them well. Any of us who'd ever been in a Bed Bath & Beyond, and I'm not a frequent shopper, but I'd been in them a couple of times, and I saw just tons of stuff for sale, kind of a little bit overwhelming. And then I would get confused by seeing people that had coupons that I didn't have. So what do they know that I don't know? But to your point, Scott, do you think that, and I don't want to beat up on Bed Bath & Beyond too badly here, but it just seems to me they had multiple opportunities to do that, to get in there talking with people that are at the store at eye level. Yeah. And how could we be making this better for you? What do you think of when you think of our business? What are we doing wrong? Right?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Why wouldn't you have employees in the store interacting with customers? What do you like? What would you like to see? Is there anything I can help you with? And just get that learning, right? That firsthand. And your thing on the coupon is right? Because I really like shopping there because it's always like you found some kind of kitchen tool you didn't know was available. It's like, oh, this is pretty cool. But the coupon thing, you're right. If I don't have a coupon, then I feel like, well, I'm out. Something's not right here. So
the thing is though, but once a company owns an associated word, term, idea with someone, to throw it away is just, I still can't fathom that. So I look at leadership, the web, I looked at and they just mismanaged themselves into bankruptcy.
The thing that pinged loudest on my radar when I read about the demise of Bed Bath, I said, this is another Sears example. Here's a company that's kind of burned into at least in the American psyche. We know it's there. We have a pretty good idea of what they do. Most of us have set foot in there, not able to compete, despite having the name recognition, despite having the presence everywhere. It's like, well, what happened? And the knee-jerk thing that everybody does is, blame the internet, blame Amazon. But in the Sears example, certainly in the Bed Bath, we were right there.
This is such a softball thing, but it just hit me, and I'm an idiot. We've got two ex Harley execs. both of you guys were around in the days when the company was falling apart or was going to go out of business, or in the short area thereafter, and built the company up. What's amazing to me, I love the brand of Harley Davidson. I don't ride one, but I love every single one that I see. I admire that because of all that it says. Without me, I've only been on a couple Harleys in my riding life, but I love that brand. You guys, Ken, you've said it live, and I've heard you talk about it a little bit, Scott, that you guys really, the focus was never selling the hardware. And here we have an example of two execs coming out of that company, and you guys didn't really talk numbers, engineering, or iron when it came to that subject. You talked about something more. You guys were part of the positioning of the company in a different way. Take that, and what do folks listening, what can they just learn real fast from you guys on like how a real company did this and became a global brand with people freaking putting orange bars and shields all over themselves?
Well, I would say one thing, and you kind of said not so focused on the product, but I would say we were, but that maybe wasn't the lead.
Yeah.
Right. So saying the expertise and the dealers and being able to answer customer questions, because you do have those customers very technical, right? But that doesn't mean that's the lead in the marketing, right? So you can't just say, I'm going to forget that, but we're going to focus more on the experience and, what it means to be on a Harley. I think we used to have the tag, things are different on a Harley, right? And I would talk about small data. I spoke at Bowling Green State University one time, and afterwards I got a letter from a professor or a call, and he said he just bought a Harley because of my presentation. He had previously owned a Honda. Now, that's great. 6 months later, I called him and said, how's the experience? And he said, oh, it's totally different. He said, he goes, when I owned a Honda, I never stopped at dealers. On my Harley, I stop at dealers all the time.
Yeah.
And he said, it's just, and people treat me differently. It's that whole experience, right? So that was the lead message with Harley. And the feature product stuff was kind of in the back, but it was still there.
I concur 1,000% with that, but let me take it a step further. Is that when businesses promote what they do, and all businesses do to their detriment, they're making themselves less competitive. Because what you do that's the obvious thing.
Table stakes.
You're a plumber, you're an accountant, you sell data, you sell dental implements, whatever those things are. And see, at the end of the day, to be more competitive, to capture the imagination and the memory and the involvement of the people that we serve, is that we have to be more human in that approach and put the human side of the business first. And human means experience, right? All an experience is what we remember. And we tend to not remember products and hardware. We remember and talk about the people behind them that delivered that experience, that were friendly to us, that were super nice, that didn't refer us to the internet when we were asking a simple question live and in person. As we humanize the business, obviously the product is key. That's the attractant, right, for most people. But when I knew, hey, you know what, this stuff is working, is when people would enter dealerships without a specific model in mind. They say, I want a Harley. Well, which one do you want? I haven't even thought it through that far yet. I just want to be part of this, what they're doing, because I like them, right? I like their approach and the camaraderie and the spirit and the soul and all these human attributes that you can't get from promoting a product and its benefits. You talk about promote and then visualize and let people see, experience, and spend time with the people behind it. That's when everything becomes real.
The stories are about the people and the experience.
Yep.
Right.
That's the stories.
And
we really do
talk
talk about that, Scott. So do me a favor, bridge. You do it already, but go from. So after you've gathered the small data, put yourself in the position of a marketing director, a marketing manager in a mid-sized, smaller company who reads the book, sees the value in it, says, okay, I'm going to embrace this and do this. Once they go ahead and start gathering that information, do you have any recommendations on how they model that information to maybe a more numbers-driven person? How do you then communicate upward into your company to make sure that this vital, sort of often overlooked data or just assumed data is embraced and reconsidered in a new way.
Well, what it does, it brings life to the hard data, right? So if you're making a presentation, you say, hey, here's the data, but then you can say, and let me tell you about a customer I talked with who said this, that brings it to life, right? So that to me is, it's the validation of maybe what your data says, or it tells you things the data doesn't. And I'll just give you an example. When we created the CVO, Custom Vehicle Operations, which was a premium, most expensive custom motorcycle we'd ever done, the question was, who's going to buy it? And there was some concern. It's really expensive. When the data comes back, one of the things we learn is that there was a higher percentage of women buying this. So why are women attracted to this highly powerful, very expensive, fully customized bike? And we say, boy, that's interesting. Until one of our employees who was at work rally said, I know why this is happening. And he talked about women coming, or shorter stature people sitting on that motorcycle and saying, it fits. It was a lower motorcycle, and they said, it fits me. So it's like, aha, we just found the small data was that people could sit on that motorcycle and it fit. He then went on and said, we're going to change our lowrider motorcycle to mimic some of the features of the CVO at a much lower price. The volume of that lowrider, when it changed, I think it like tripled, and the percent of women who bought it tripled. That's an example of how small data, some interactions with customers, can add to what your hard data, right? So they kind of work together.
And the question is, it's not, but it cannot and will not happen until the people in power, the leader of the business, the owner of the business says, this is what we're going to do. This is what I expect of you, because I'm going to be doing it too. I'm going to be spending time with customers. Yeah, we're going to send the surveys out because, gee, that's the measurable data that we use to quantify our pay raises at the end of the year. Yeah, we're not going to stop doing that. But what we as a business are going to do is we're going to go out and we're going to get this data. We're going to be more intimate with the people that we serve and hope to serve than our competitors are, because that's going to give us huge advantage. How that got lost, I'll never understand.
Well, I think, a lot of we'll like to say we're customer led. Yeah. Right. That's a common term. But
customer centric.
But what does that mean? If you say, show me what you're doing, that shows that you actually are, right? And by the way, sometimes you don't want to be necessarily customer led, because customer might lead you down the wrong path.
Yeah, sure.
And that's part of the detective too, being able to, look and decipher that information. So.
Well, to that point, and you've said it, and I agree with it 100%, that what was the old Steve Jobs quote, that people don't know what they want until you show it to them. Yeah. You say that in a room full of people, they all nod their head like this. You don't nod your head like that, Scott. I don't either. I know more. So
I look at that and say, people know what they want, but they don't know how to get it. Yeah. They don't have the technical know-how. People knew, I want to listen to the music I want to listen to wherever and as conveniently as possible. Throughout history with music, that's what people wanted. But no regular customer said, gee, I wonder if there's a way I could get all the music I own on something that's about the size of a deck of cards.
Right.
But they knew what they wanted, but they didn't have the solution. And, there's that Jobs quote, but he also says, when he talks about product development, you got to start with the customer experience and what benefits they're looking for. And in that case, I'd say, the way you get that, let's go out and talk to customers. And you would see what they want from music.
So I think to put a bow on this is using what you've written in The Marketing Detective, the whole idea, the value of small data, combined carefully, because, detective work, as we think about all those shows, there's inevitably the interrogation room with where were you on the night of the 27th type of thing. That's the actual big data.
That's
But the
because you're such a huge fan of Matlock.
pretty much. It's and when I'm feeling a little rambunctious, I go to MeTV and watch some old McClouds. God, how old are we? But you take the big data information, right? You take all of those stats and numbers that have been paid a lot of money for. Operations loves it. Finance reluctantly puts up with the spend because they know they're going to get the hard data. But you then marry that with the small data and contextualize it in a way that ultimately gets to, look, this is where we sit from a positioning standpoint. This is what the market says they're looking for in this. And here's what we're doing successfully. And here are the gaps. I think tying this into a way in which the positioning question gets answered so executive leadership can start embracing a way to actually not just think about the issue, but embodying it through the collection of stuff, as you're mentioning, Scott, in the book, through small data, but then we're not throwing the proverbial big data out at all, but we're just adding an element to it to give it actual more meaning.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, on that note, Scott, I mean, you're not going to go away. You are literally in the room with Ken, so you are going to stick around for what's got our attention this week.
Yeah.
Fan favorite section, and I kind of love it as well. So I own the microphone, so let's go ahead. Let's take it to our Milwaukee Brewers fan and shirt wearing Ken Schmidt to talk about hopefully something other than his Brewers. Ken, what do you got?
Oh, I could go on Brewers all day. This is something that I found utterly delightful in a very surprising way. I don't know or confess to know anything, or I didn't, about Arnold Schwarzenegger, other than big dude, bodybuilder, obviously Hollywood guy, governor of California, etc. Go to Netflix. It's a 3-episode series called Arnold. And if you don't have time to watch the whole thing, it's only maybe 4 hours total. The first episode, you could watch it with the sound down and see what I think the whole world kind of forgot about him as a young, bodybuilder before people talked about bodybuilders back in the 60s and 70s. He built himself into it. I was like stunned. Look, at the largest human being I've ever seen in my life. And he admits, in a kind of throwaway sentence, that there were steroids and stuff involved. But just look at what a human being can do to their body and how massive that was. And then how he was able to build not just a personal brand, but a massive cult of personality around his accent, his body size. He gets elected governor of California, for God's sake. The Terminator. Household name on every continent. Just fascinating to watch how that was done. And again, just how massive as a human being he was in his prime.
Nice. Scott, what do you got?
What I got is McDonald's has announced that they're getting rid of their self-serve soda machines. Right. And part of the reason for that is the drive-through is so popular.
Right.
And they said 40% of their business is done electronically or through delivery services. So they're looking to make their dining room smaller, et cetera. So it interests me from the standpoint, I have decades of experience with them. I remember back when the little slogan was, "You deserve a break today, so get up and get away to McDonald's," right? It was take the family there, the high school kids, a meeting spot.
Oh, yeah.
And now there's this big change. However, thinking back to my class at MSOE, for those students, this isn't a big change. They're not sitting in McDonald's. They're driving through. They're not. And it gets me to this point of we see things, say a baby boomer like I am, and say, boy, something has really changed. You get to that younger generation, it's not. It just is what it is. That generation in college right now has always had a smartphone. They've always had Tesla. Electric cars aren't a big deal. And so I'm really thinking through that. And there's a book I'm reading right now called The Aftermath, The Last Days of the Baby Boom, which is fascinating, where you see these generational differences. And it's really intriguing to me to think about how to communicate differently and how different generations react to something. So that's kind of got my attention right now.
Starbucks, Chick-fil-A, Taco Bell, are all doing this. And what I experienced recently was it struck me as I got out of my car and I tried to go into a Starbucks, how difficult it was to get to the door, because I was walking through a series of cars in line, and this one had no, I'm sorry, it had one lane. The Chick-fil-A had 2 lanes, and it was just, I was like, wow, these are no longer a place to go and gather. These are really to drive in and go out. Clearly, the demographics have changed, and the model is shifting in front of us.
Yeah, I went to Panera for lunch, and it took quite a while to get my food. And I'm like, but there's hardly anybody here. But I just kept seeing all these delivery people walking in, right?
Yeah.
It was delivery orders.
Big shift.
It's a big shift. Yeah.
What a world.
All right. Well, there are 2 things that have got my attention this week. One, I want to do, it's not log rolling for us, but it's a plug to a friend of the show, Amanda Schneider of Think Lab. Season 2 of their podcast, Design Nerds Anonymous, has just launched. Ken and I are fans. It's well worth a listen to. It's intriguing, if nothing else, even if you're not involved in the world of design or office culture, just to understand where this is going. Amanda always pulls some great facts out, interesting people thinking about this stuff. So it's cool. Season 2 is up, and I just listened to the first episode. It's a joy. Positioning, guys, though, I loved it when you sent this to me, because I was like, man, and I started like diving hard into all of these different companies and everything. And just in the typical Martin nonsense, I'm scrolling through a myriad of stuff. And this is one of my favorite things I've seen. And the headline is this: a woman accidentally swallowed an AirPod instead of her vitamins while she was distracted, sparking curiosity and sympathy as she eagerly awaits for it to pass. It turns out that I'm
going to live stream that.
This is like one of the most charming stories ever. And the woman's name is Tana Barker, and she's somewhere in Utah. She's a real estate agent. And the positioning thing, what is so important here for me, because she's not doing this to be some sort of internet star or sensation. She simply put this up on TikTok. No makeup. She only has one AirPod in her ear, as we learn why. But she is sitting there telling the story, saying, okay, guys, this is totally ridiculous. I was in this incredible conversation with a dear friend, massive life changes. And she starts multitasking, and she's taking her vitamins, and she inadvertently throws one of her vitamins into the mouth, and she's like, wow, that's hard to swallow. And she drank more water and drank it. And then all of a sudden got done with the call and looked down and saw that she still had the actual vitamin in her hand. And instead of this being like, what's so heartwarming to me is, here this person takes what is something that is a stupid move, but it's a stupid move that all of us could have done. I mean, it's just a harmless thing, right? And instead of going out there and being mortified, they embraced it, shared the story, and she's done subsequent videos. I still am not looking, but she did say, yeah, this thing, the doctors have said this thing has to pass. And then she takes her iPhone, quite hilariously, because the iPhone has a device that has a Find Me function. And as you bring it closer to one of the other devices, it'll ding and go off. So there's an actual shot of her putting her iPhone by her stomach, and the thing is pinging, letting her know that her AirPod is there. Her husband is like, when she leaves, he's like, yeah, no, I'm tracking you now. Literally, I know where you are. So Tana Baker, it just made me happy, because it made me think when you said this about positioning, Ken, like just our behaviors, like the type of behaviors we all should sort of exact, even in great situations, even in dumb situations. It says so much to character. And weirdly, there's a corporate lesson in there as well. Just admit something screwed up and roll on.
I have, and to that point, not nearly as fun, been reading a lot of stuff about the ramifications of so much multitasking. So many mistakes being made, so many car accidents, so many people dying, so many people taking the wrong meds, so many people swallowing their electronic devices, all because people are trying to move too fast because they think they're supposed to.
Yeah.
There's a classic example. We wish Ms. Barker good health and a visit to a proctologist if need be. And anyway, all thanks very much for listening. Scott, go ahead, plug the book. Tell us the title, where we can get it.
Yep, title is The Marketing Detective, Discovering the Secrets of Small Data to Fulfill Customer Needs, and you can find it on Amazon.
Fantastic. Scott, really
Highly recommend.
Really, yeah, no, without a doubt. Enjoyed the read. Thanks so much for joining us. Ken, as always, it's a pleasure seeing you. Hope to see you face-to-face at some point in the future. That's it for all of us. Thanks again to Kate Hickson of Hickson Design for her work for us. The music you're rolling out to is from Devin Davis. You can find his information at devindaviswebsite.com. I'm Martin Flaherty, and we will see you in a bit. And we'll probably find some interesting anecdote about Lakon to share with you in the future. Thanks, everybody.
Ciao.